The sun was just dipping behind the red cliffs when Calder Hayes rode back toward his ranch, the sky painted in streaks of dying gold. The day had been long filled with broken fences, wandering cattle, and the kind of quiet that reminded him how empty his life had felt since Lilla's passing. His horse's slow steps echoed in the stillness as he guided her toward the barn, dreaming only of rest. But the moment he stepped inside, rest became the last thing on his mind. The lantern beside the stable door was still burning, its soft glow stretching across the hay-covered ground. At first Calder thought one of his ranch hands had fallen asleep on duty, but as he walked closer, boots crunching quietly, he saw someone lying curled against his mare Sable's flank. A woman, a very young, unfamiliar woman, dust-covered, clothes torn, hair tangled with straw. Her breathing was shallow, as if she'd been running until her legs gave out. One arm lay protectively over a small bundle tied with a rope. The other was buried in Sable's mane as though she had collapsed seeking warmth. Calder froze, instinct pulling him back a step. No stranger ever got this close to Sable. The mare was skittish around everyone except him and his late wife. The fact that she was standing perfectly still, as though guarding the sleeping woman, sent a strange ripple down Calder's spine. He crouched slowly, trying not to startle either of them. The woman's face came into the lantern light, exhausted yet soft. Clearly someone who had not known peace in a long time. Her boots were worn nearly to holes, and her hands trembled even in sleep. "Miss?" Calder whispered, his voice low, steady. Before he could touch her shoulder, the woman stirred. She tucked her chin closer to Sable's warm belly, her lips moving soundlessly at first. Then words formed, barely audible, but clear enough to hit Calder like a pistol shot. "Leela, don't leave me." He felt the world tilt. Leela, his wife's name. A name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in over 2 years. A name he guarded like a wound. His heart hammered painfully. The barn felt suddenly too small, too close. How did this stranger know Lilla's name? Why whisper it like a plea? The woman flinched in her sleep, as though tormented by a nightmare. Her voice trembled. "Leela, please. I'm trying. Calder reached out but hesitated, his hand hovering inches above her. Memories flooded back. Leela laughing, braiding Sable's mane. Leela whispering goodbyes the night she fell ill. Lilla's voice breaking as she told him to be strong. Hearing that name now from a stranger. In his barn, beside Lilla's favorite horse. It was too much like a sign or a haunting. Finally, the woman's eyes blinked open wide, frightened, confused. She jerked back with a gasp, scrambling away from Calder. "Who, where?" She stammered, breathing fast. "You're safe," Calder said gently, hands held up. "You're on my ranch. I found you asleep beside my horse." She looked down at Sable as though only just realizing where she'd been resting. Then tears welled in her eyes and she whispered, "I didn't mean to trespass. I just needed somewhere warm." Calder nodded, still shaken. "You were talking in your sleep." She stiffened. "I was." "Yes, you," said a name. His voice tightened despite his efforts. "You said Leela." The woman's expression changed instantly, fear, then confusion, then blankness as though she didn't recognize the name at all. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know anyone by that name," she said softly. "I must have been dreaming." But Calder wasn't convinced. The moment stretched between them, his grief, her exhaustion, the impossible echo of his past hanging in the air. And deep inside him, something old and hurting stirred for the first time in years. For a long moment, neither Calder nor the young widow moved. The barn seemed to hold its breath. Sable snorted softly, shifting her weight. But even the mare sensed the strange tension between the two humans. Calder stood slowly, dusting his hands on his jeans, his gaze never leaving the stranger. The lantern light flickered across her face, pale, tired, lined with dust and grief. Not the face of someone who would lie easily, but also not the face of someone who should know Lilla's name. Calder crossed his arms, trying to steady himself. "You're telling me you don't know why you said that name?" The woman swallowed hard, her fingers curling tightly around the small bundle she carried. Arms tense, she shook her head. "I swear I don't," she whispered. I hardly remember falling asleep. I was so tired. I just saw the barn and thought your horse might keep me warm. Calder studied her carefully. She wasn't trembling from cold. She was trembling from fear. He took a step back, softening his voice. "What's your name?" After a pause, she whispered, "Evelyn Quinn." Her voice cracked softly on the last syllable as if even her name felt heavy. Calder nodded. "I'm Calder Hayes. This is my ranch." At the sound of his name, Evelyn looked up sharply. "Hayes? Is this Hayes Crossing?" "It is," Calder confirmed, though unease flickered inside him. Evelyn's expression shifted almost as if the name meant something to her. Though she tried to hide it, he decided to move carefully. "Evelyn," he said, keeping his tone even, "I need you to understand something. Leela wasn't just any name. It was my wife's." Evelyn's face softened with something like sympathy, but her eyes stayed confused. Almost frightened. "I'm sorry for your loss," she murmured. "Truly. But I promise, I didn't know her." Calder's jaw tightened. "Then why speak her name in your sleep?" Evelyn's gaze drifted downward. She looked as if she was searching for an answer she didn't have. "I was dreaming," she said quietly. "I remember almost nothing. Only a woman. A woman taking my hand, leading me to safety." Calder's pulse quickened. "And she spoke to you?" "I think so," Evelyn whispered. "But dreams twist things. I was so tired, afraid. Maybe my mind created someone who felt gentle." Her voice shook, and she wrapped her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. Calder let silence settle for a moment. He didn't want to press too hard, but how could he ignore what he'd heard? Lila's name hadn't crossed his ears in months, and never from the mouth of a stranger. That name lived in his heart, buried deep where no traveler could dig it up still. He forced himself to steady. "Why were you running?" Calder asked softly. Evelyn stiffened instantly. Her eyes darted toward the barn door, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "I just needed to get away," she said quickly. "That's not an answer." Calder's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. "You're hurt, exhausted, and terrified. Who's after you?" Evelyn looked away, biting her lips so hard Calder worried she'd draw blood. After several long seconds, she finally whispered, "Someone who doesn't care if I live or die." A chill rippled through the barn. Calder crouched again, lowering himself to her height so she didn't feel cornered. "Evelyn, you ended up on my land, beside my horse, whispering my wife's name. I can't ignore that. But I'm not here to hurt you. I just need the truth so I know what danger you bring with you." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm not trying to bring danger anywhere. I just ran until I couldn't anymore." Calder could see she wasn't ready to share everything, not yet. But the fear was real. The desperation was real. And Lila's name. That couldn't be a coincidence. He let out a slow breath. "Come to the house," he said finally. "You need food. Rest. Then we talk." Evelyn nodded weakly, clutching her belongings like a lifeline. As Calder helped her stand, she glanced once more at Sable, touching the mare's cheek gently, almost instinctively. Calder noticed Sable only behaved that way with Leela. His unease deepened. Something was tying Evelyn to his past, something he didn't understand. But one thing was clear. This stranger knew more than she realized. Calder guided Evelyn toward the ranch house through the cool evening air. The moon had risen, pale and watchful over the fields, casting long shadows across the ground. Evelyn walked slowly, limping slightly, her bundle clutched tight against her chest. Calder kept a respectful distance, but his eyes remained sharp, observing every tremor, every hesitant step. He wasn't just curious, he was concerned. And somewhere beneath the concern, a quiet tug he didn't want to name yet. When they reached the porch, Calder pushed open the door and gestured her inside. The house was warm, lit by firelight and lanterns, simple, quiet, lived in. Evelyn stepped across the threshold cautiously, as if afraid the floor might vanish beneath her. "You can sit," Calder said. Nodding to a wooden chair by the hearth. Evelyn lowered herself carefully, wincing as she bent her knee. Calder noticed the bruise peeking above her boot, the swelling that suggested she'd been struck or had fallen hard. He grabbed a pot, filled it with water, and set it on the stove to heat. "Hungry?" She nodded weakly, though she didn't lift her eyes as Calder moved around the kitchen. He caught her gaze darting to the door every few seconds. She was listening, really listening for footsteps, horses, anything. This wasn't ordinary fear. This was the kind of terror that came from being hunted. When he placed a bowl of warm stew before her, Evelyn's hands shook so badly she could barely steady her spoon. Calder sat across from her, giving her space, but his expression left no room for evasion. "Evelyn," he said gently, "you told me someone doesn't care if you live or die. I need to know who." She froze mid-bite, shoulders tightening. For a moment it seemed she wouldn't answer, but then her eyes softened with resignation. "My husband, Thomas Quinn, died 6 months ago," she said quietly. "Fever took him fast." "Too fast?" Calder nodded sympathetically. "Grief recognized grief. We didn't have much," she continued. "Just a small shack outside Riverbend. Thomas had borrowed money before he got sick, promised he'd pay it back with the winter harvest." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "But he didn't live to see winter." Calder's jaw set. He could already guess where this was going. The man who lent him the money, Evelyn said, swallowing hard, wasn't patient or kind. "He gave me 1 month to repay everything, and you couldn't," Calder said gently. She shook her head, tears appearing despite her attempt to remain composed. "I had nothing but my wedding ring. And when that wasn't enough, he said I could work off the debt." Calder felt his blood heat. What kind of work? Evelyn didn't meet his eyes. The kind no decent woman would choose. Silence thickened between them. Calder forced himself to stay calm, though his fists clenched beneath the table. "Did he hurt you?" "He tried," she whispered, "but I escaped before he could. I ran barefoot into the night, made it as far as I could before my boots tore up, and I just kept running." "And he's after you now?" "Yes." Her voice trembled. "He sent men. I saw them 2 days ago near Ridge Valley. I hid in the brush until they passed. I haven't slept properly in days." Calder breathed slowly, working through his anger. Men like that always believed the world owed them obedience. And a widow alone? She was easy prey. But something still didn't fit. He leaned forward. "All right, you were running. You escaped. But why come here? Hayes Crossing is quite small. Strangers don't pass through by accident." Evelyn stared into her bowl, voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to come here. I was just following the river. I didn't know where I was going. My feet led me more than my mind." "Your feet," Calder repeated, "or your dream?" Her breath caught. Calder hadn't missed the moment earlier how she'd said a woman guided her to safety. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her spoon. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe I dreamed her because I needed comfort. Maybe I said that name because I heard it somewhere before. Or maybe—" She hesitated, eyes flickering toward the window. "Maybe I'm losing my mind." Calder leaned back in his chair, studying her. No, she wasn't mad. She was terrified and running blind, but not mad. And the fact remained, she somehow spoke Lilla's name. Curled beside Lilla's favorite horse, there was more to this widow than bruises and fear. After she finished her meal, Evelyn looked up timidly. "Thank you. For the food. For not turning me away." Calder nodded. "You can rest here tonight. No one will touch you under my roof." For the first time, Evelyn's eyes softened, not with relief, but with gratitude so pure it made Calder's chest tighten. But as she rose to follow him to the spare room, she brushed past him and he caught the faintest scent of lavender. Lilla's scent. Calder froze. Evelyn didn't seem to notice, and that unsettled him most of all. The ranch house fell quiet after Evelyn went to the guest room. Calder stayed in the kitchen much longer than necessary, staring into the dying fire while his thoughts twisted into knots. Evelyn Quinn, a widow on the run, bruised, exhausted, terrified. But none of that explained Lilla's name whispering from her lips, or why Sable, who trusted almost no one, had let the woman curl up beside her like an old friend. Something about Evelyn felt impossibly familiar, not in her face or voice but in her presence. It was as if she carried a piece of Lila's gentleness without knowing it. Calder finally extinguished the lanterns and headed to his own room. But sleep refused to come. When it finally did, it was light, restless, and easily broken. Hours later, deep into the night, Calder woke to a sound. A voice. Not loud, not clear, but close. He sat up quickly, listening. At first, he thought he was dreaming, until the voice came again, floating faintly through the hallway. Someone was talking. No, whispering. He recognized the voice instantly. Evelyn. Calder threw on his boots and moved silently down the hall. The guest room door was slightly ajar. The moonlight poured through the window, bathing the small room in silver. Evelyn lay on the bed, tangled in the blanket, her brow furrowed, her breathing quick and uneven. She was trapped in another dream, another nightmare, and her lips kept moving. Lila. Lila, please. Calder's heart dropped into his stomach. He pushed the door open a little further, stepping inside. Evelyn didn't wake. She didn't seem aware of anything around her. Her fingers clutched at the bedsheet as if holding someone's hand. Then she whispered something that froze Calder where he stood. Don't worry. I'll keep the promise. I won't let him hurt anyone else. Calder's blood ran cold. Those were Lila's words. The exact words she had spoken to him the night before she died, words spoken only to him, privately. As she held his hand and told him she wasn't afraid. No one else had heard them. No one else even knew she'd said them. Yet here Evelyn was, whispering them in the dark, as if reliving a memory that wasn't hers. Calder stepped closer, barely breathing. Evelyn, he whispered. Wake up. But she didn't. Her voice softened, trembling, almost pleading. Lila, don't go. Stay with me. Stay. Suddenly Evelyn awoke with a sharp inhale, like a drowning woman breaking the surface. She sat up straight, eyes wide with panic, sweat on her forehead. Her gaze snapped to Calder standing in the doorway. For a heartbeat, she didn't recognize him. Then her fear softened into embarrassment and then confusion. Calder, what are you doing? I could ask you the same, he said quietly. You were talking in your sleep again. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. I'm sorry. I must have had a nightmare. That wasn't a nightmare, Calder said, stepping fully into the room. You spoke her name again. Lila. Evelyn's face paled instantly. And not just that. Calder continued, his voice tight with emotion he was trying to control. You said things you couldn't possibly know. Evelyn shook her head weakly. Calder, I don't understand. I don't remember saying anything. Then remember now, he insisted gently. Tell me what you dreamed. Her hands trembled as she held the blanket. I saw a woman. Not clearly. Just her silhouette. She kept reaching for me, guiding me through darkness. I followed her because I felt safe, like she wanted to protect me. Calder swallowed hard. That's not all, Evelyn whispered. I could feel her sadness, deep, painful sadness, and something else. A warning? A warning? Calder asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. I don't know how to explain it, but the dream didn't feel like a dream. It felt like someone trying to tell me something. She shivered, and every time I try to remember her face, it slips away. Calder exhaled shakily, sitting on the edge of her bed. Evelyn, he said softly. Lila was the only person Sable trusted, the only one she'd let touch her without fear. But tonight, Sable let you. Evelyn stared at him, confused and frightened. What are you saying? I don't know yet, Calder admitted, but that something is happening. Something I can't explain. For the first time, Evelyn looked truly terrified, not of her pursuers, but of the unknown, the invisible thread pulling her deeper into a stranger's life. Calder placed a calming hand on the blanket near hers, not touching her, but close enough to offer steadiness. You're safe here, he said softly, no matter what's coming. Evelyn nodded, though uncertainty still clouded her eyes, and as Calder left the room, closing the door gently behind him, a thought crept into his heart. Was Leela trying to reach him? Through Evelyn? The next morning arrived heavy and grey, as if the sky itself sensed the weight pressing on the ranch. Calder barely slept after hearing Evelyn whisper Lila's words. Questions churned in his mind like a storm he couldn't outrun. Was Evelyn connected to Leela? Had Leela somehow guided her here? Or was everything just coincidence layered on tragedy? Calder wasn't a man who believed in signs, but this was pushing him past anything he could rationalize. When he stepped into the kitchen, Evelyn was already sitting at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of warm water, too nervous to pour herself coffee. Dark circles wrung her eyes. She looked like she'd been awake most of the night. "Morning," Calder said softly. She flinched at his voice, then managed a small nod. "Good morning." They ate in silence for a few minutes, tension thick between them. Finally, Evelyn set her cup down and took a shaky breath. "Calder, last night, the way you looked at me like I'd stolen something from you, I need you to know. I wasn't trying to upset you." He shook his head. "You didn't upset me. You scared me." "There's a difference." Evelyn's eyes softened, but uncertainty still clouded them. Calder leaned forward. "Evelyn, I need you to tell me everything. Not just pieces. Not just what you think I want to hear. Everything." She hesitated, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. For a moment, Calder thought she might refuse again, but then her shoulders slumped and something inside her seemed to give way. Exhaustion, surrender, or maybe trust. "All right," she whispered. There is something I didn't tell you." Calder's pulse quickened. Evelyn reached into her small bundle of belongings. Her hands shook as she untied the rope. Inside was almost nothing: a torn shawl, a scrap of bread, the last coin she owned. And then, a glint of silver. Evelyn lifted it carefully, as if afraid the metal might burn her. A silver locket on a delicate chain. Calder's breath caught. "I didn't know what it was at first." Evelyn murmured, "Your wife Leela gave it to me." Calder shot up from his chair. "That's impossible." Evelyn winced but held her ground. "She did." Calder paced once, twice, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. "Leela has been gone for 2 years." Evelyn's voice trembled. "She wasn't when I met her." Calder froze. Slowly, very slowly, Evelyn opened the locket and slid it across the table. Inside were 2 things: a tiny pressed wildflower, Lila's favorite, the kind she tucked behind Calder's ear when she flirted with him. A miniature sketch of Calder and Leela, drawn the summer before she fell ill. Calder felt the world tilt. His lungs struggled for air. "This locket," he whispered hoarsely. "I buried this with her." "I know." Evelyn whispered. She told me it didn't belong in the ground." Calder gripped the table as if it were the only solid thing left in his world. "When did she give this to you?" he asked, voice tight. Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. "About 7 months ago. My husband and I stopped at a trading post near the canyon. A woman approached us, kind eyes, soft voice. She warned us we were being followed. That danger was coming for us." Calder stared in shock. "Leela warned you?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "She never gave her full name. She only said, 'Call me Leela.' And she begged us to take the locket, told us it would lead us somewhere safe. If things ever turned dark." Calder sat heavily, struggling to process the impossible. "The next morning," Evelyn whispered, "my husband fell ill, and the woman Leela was gone." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. "I didn't know who she really was until you said her name. I didn't know she was gone." She swallowed hard. "But Calder, I swear on my life, that's the woman who guided me to your barn in my dream." Calder's voice cracked. Why you? Why not come to me?" Evelyn shook her head helplessly. "I don't know. I only know she wanted to protect me. And now she wants to warn you." Calder felt his world split in two between reality and something larger, something spiritual, something impossible to deny. Leela, alive months after her death? Or something of Leela moving through the world for one last purpose? He took the locket into his hands. His thumb brushed the sketch. His throat tightened. Evelyn watched him carefully. "Calder, whoever is after me, they're close. And I don't think Leela guided me here for no reason. Calder looked up slowly, resolve sharpening his features. No, he whispered. She didn't. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't accident. Leela had left a trail one Evelyn had unknowingly followed straight into his life. And somewhere on that trail, danger was closing in. By mid-afternoon, the ranch had returned to its usual rhythm on the surface, but underneath, a tension simmered like heat before a storm. Calder fixed fences, checked the herd, did everything he normally did. But his mind kept circling back to the silver locket in his pocket. Lila's locket, the one buried with the dot, and Evelyn, terrified, hunted, whispering Lila's words as if they were memories borrowed from beyond the grave. Calder couldn't deny it any longer. Leela guided her here, and Lila's warning through Evelyn meant danger was closer than he thought. Evelyn stayed inside most of the morning, resting by the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She watched the fields with wide, wary eyes, as if expecting something to appear on the horizon at any moment. When Calder came inside for water, she looked up quickly. "Calder," she said quietly, "something's wrong." He stiffened. "What did you see?" "It's not something I saw. It's a feeling." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Like the air changes before lightning strikes. Like someone's walking toward the house even if I can't hear them yet." Calder nodded grimly. He had felt it to the unease, the heaviness, the sense of being watched. Still, he forced his voice to stay calm. "I'll keep the doors locked. No one gets near this house without my knowing." Evelyn looked like she wanted to believe him, but fear still flickered beneath her lashes. Just as Calder turned toward the door again, she added softly, "Calder, if anything happens to me, don't blame Leela. She didn't bring me to hurt you." He paused, studying her expression, the sincerity in her voice. "I don't blame her," he said. "Not anymore." But inside, he was still shaken. The first signal of day warned. Clouds drifting lazily overhead. Calder was in the barn when he heard frantic barking. His old ranch dog, Cooper, rarely barked unless something was wrong. Calder rushed outside. Cooper stood at the edge of the property, growling, ears flat, tail stiff. His gaze was fixed on the tree line where the forest stretched thick and dark. Calder felt his chest tighten. "Easy, boy," he murmured, stepping beside him. But the dog only growled harder. That's when Calder saw them. Hoofprints, fresh ones, heading toward his land, not away from it. Calder crouched down, touching the indents in the soil. 3 horses, he estimated, ridden fast. Not casual travelers. Someone was approaching with purpose, and Evelyn's feelings suddenly didn't seem like fear, it felt like warning. Evelyn's panic. When Calder returned to the house, Evelyn was standing in the middle of the living room, clutching her shawl, eyes wide with dread. "You felt it too," she whispered. Calder didn't bother to lie. 3 riders, close. He grabbed his rifle from the wall. "We don't know yet if they're after you." "Yes, we do," she whispered. Calder sighed deeply, turning toward her. "Evelyn, listen to me carefully. You're safe here. I'm not letting anyone hurt you, but they won't stop," she said. "The man who lent Thomas that money, he doesn't let go. He'll follow me until he's standing on your porch." Calder stepped closer, voice firm. "Then he'll regret coming to my land." Evelyn's breath trembled, but she nodded. The men in the valley be late afternoon. Calder saddled his horse and rode up the ridge overlooking the valley. He didn't like leaving Evelyn alone, but she insisted she'd stay locked inside and out of sight. He reached the ridge and froze. Down below, on the narrow trail winding toward the ranch, 3 men on horseback moved steadily forward. Their silhouettes were sharp against the dusty horizon. Calder recognized the way they rode, not drifting, not wandering, hunting. One rider, the largest of the 3, tipped his hat as if acknowledging Calder from far away, as if to say, "We know you're watching." Calder's jaw tightened. They weren't just passing through. They were coming straight for the ranch. He returned home quickly. The message left at the gate on his way in. He noticed something tied to the front fence, something that hadn't been there before. A strip of torn fabric. He dismounted, jaw clenched, and pulled it free. It was a piece of Evelyn's old dress, the one she ran in, the one torn by branches and rocks. Someone had placed it there deliberately. A silent message, We're close. We know she's here. This isn't over. Calder felt the anger rise in him like wildfire. No one hunted an innocent woman on his land. No one threatened someone Leela herself had guided to safety. He pocketed the fabric and went inside. Evelyn stood the moment he entered, her face pale, eyes searching his. "What did you see?" she asked in a trembling voice. Calder pulled the strip of cloth from his pocket and held it up. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth. "No, no, no." "They'll come at night," Calder said quietly. "Men like this, they prefer the dark." Her knees buckled and Calder caught her before she fell. For a moment, she clung to him, shaking uncontrollably. Her voice was barely a breath. "Calder, Leela didn't lead me here to save just me." Calder swallowed hard. "Then who?" he asked. Evelyn looked up at him, eyes wide with a truth she didn't want to say. "You." Night settled over the ranch like a soft blanket, wrapping the land in quiet and shadow. The sky above Hayes Crossing shimmered with 1,000 stars, bright, cold, and endless. The kind of stars Calder used to sit beneath with Leela leaning against her shoulder. Speaking dreams they never got the chance to chase, he hadn't sat out here since she died. But now he found himself on the back porch, leaning against the worn railing, staring up at the sky as if searching for answers he'd buried long ago. The boards creaked behind him, light and hesitant. He knew who it was without turning. Evelyn. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in one of Lila's old quilts. The fabric was too big on her, the colors a little faded, but it made her look softer, like someone who belonged somewhere at last. "Calder," she said quietly, "can I sit with you?" He nodded, trying not to show the way his chest tightened. She stepped beside him, lowering herself onto the porch step. The night air brushed against them, cool and gentle. For a while, they just sat in silence, listening to the crickets and the slow exhale of the land. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Leela," she whispered. "Tell me about her." Calder's jaw tightened, but not from anger this time. From memory, pain, love. He let out a slow breath. She was sunlight, he said. The kind of woman who made everything feel easier just by walking into the room. Smart, stubborn, and always 5 steps ahead of me. A faint smile touched his lips. She loved this place more than I ever did. Saw beauty in every corner. Evelyn listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "And she loved you," she added softly. Calder nodded. "More than I ever understood." He paused, staring at the sky. Losing her felt like the world stopped turning. Evelyn swallowed, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, truly. I didn't mean to bring that pain to the surface." "You didn't," he said gently. "I let it stay buried too long." A soft wind brushed through the porch. Evelyn turned her face upward to the stars. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes, sorrow, longing, maybe something deeper. "I lost someone too," she whispered. "Not a husband, but everything I knew. The woman I used to be. The life I thought I had." Calder turned toward her. "You don't have to tell me. I want to," she interrupted softly. "You've given me shelter, food, safety. The least I can give is the truth." So she told him about the marriage that wasn't really a marriage, about the man who controlled her every step, about the night she finally found the courage to run, about how her fear followed her even after miles of dust and darkness. Calder listened in silence, every muscle tense with anger not at her, but at the cruelty she endured. When she finished, Evelyn's voice shook, but her eyes stayed dry. "I came here because I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. "But part of me wonders if something led me here, something bigger than fear." Calder looked at her, really looked at her, at the quiet strength in her posture, at the fragile hope in her voice, at the way she held Lila's quilt as if it protected her. "Evelyn," he said softly, "I don't believe in fate much, but I can't deny there's something about you that feels like I've known you longer than a few days." Evelyn's breath caught. "I feel it too." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world stilled. The night around them warmed as if even the stars paused to listen. Calder leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I don't know what this is yet," he murmured, but I know I don't want you to leave." Evelyn's lips parted. Trembling with emotion she tried to contain. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. A long, quiet stillness wrapped around them, gentle, fragile, hopeful. Calder shifted slightly closer. "So, did she?" Their shoulders brushed, feather light, but enough to send a shock through both of them. Not a shock of fear. A spark. For the first time since Lila's death, Calder felt something open inside him, something warm, something alive. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt safe sitting beside a man, under the same stars that once watched over Calder and Lila. A new story, soft, uncertain, but real, began to rise between them. The morning after the tense night on the porch arrived with a crisp, gentle wind that carried the scent of sagebrush across the ranch. Calder woke early, restless, thinking of the events of the past few days, the woman on the run, the locket, the whispers of Lila, and the sense that fate itself had drawn Evelyn to him. He stepped outside to see Evelyn already in the barn, gently brushing Sable's mane. The mare nickered softly when she saw him, then nuzzled Evelyn's shoulder, content and calm. Calder's chest tightened, watching Evelyn with Sable handling the horse with the same tenderness Lila once had was bittersweet and strangely comforting. "Morning," he said softly. Evelyn looked up, her tired eyes lighting with a small smile. "Morning." There was a moment of quiet as Calder approached her, the sun rising behind the mountains and painting the barn in warm gold. It felt like a beginning, fragile but certain. The lesson of the past. Evelyn turned toward him, a serious look settling on her features. "I keep thinking about last night, about Lila." Calder's lips pressed together. "She's guided more than just you here. She's guided me too." Evelyn nodded. "I feel it, like she's leaving a map, a path for both of us to follow. And maybe it's time to start living again." Calder exhaled, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying slipping from his shoulders. Lila's presence, her memory, her locket, her whispers hadn't trapped them in the past. It had opened a door to something new. The decision to trust these spent the morning together in quiet companionship. Calder showed Evelyn the areas of the ranch she could help with, explaining tasks she could manage safely while he watched for threats. Each small action, feeding the horses, checking fences, repairing equipment, built a bridge of trust between them. Evelyn listened and learned, but she also shared her own wisdom: how to move silently, how to read the weather, how to handle fear without letting it rule her. Calder watched her, realizing that this young widow, so broken yet resilient, had become not only a survivor but a guide in her own right. The sign from Liloc noon. As they worked together near the corral, Evelyn paused. She tilted her head toward the wind, eyes closed. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Calder felt it, to a gentle, almost imperceptible shift in the air, like a soft sigh brushing past them. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly. "It's her, Lila. She's happy. She approves." Calder reached for the silver locket at his neck, running his thumb over the tiny pressed flower inside. "I think you're right. She wanted us to find each other, to heal." Evelyn smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "The first in months. Then let's not waste this chance." The promise of tomorrow. That evening, after the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky was painted in shades of orange and violet, Calder and Evelyn sat outside the barn together. Sable grazed nearby, calm and trusting, a symbol of continuity between the past and the present. Evelyn leaned lightly against Calder, her hand brushing his. "I've never felt safe before," she whispered. "You are now," Calder replied. "And you'll stay that way." They sat together under the vast sky, a quiet understanding passing between them. Their past's grief, loss, fear would not define them. They would create something new. Calder took a slow breath. "I don't know what comes next, but I know this: I want to face it with you." Evelyn's hand squeezed his. "And I want that too." In the distance, the first stars appeared, twinkling gently as if blessing their choice. The memory of Lila, once a source of sorrow, now guided them toward hope. Her whisper, her locket, and the path she left had led to a new beginning, not just for Evelyn, but for Calder as well. Under the same stars that once watched over Calder and his late wife, a new story began. one of healing, trust, and a love born not from chance, but from the guidance of someone who had loved deeply and wanted them to live fully. For the first time in years, the ranch and their hearts felt whole again.